Welcome to the HR Chat podcast, bringing the best of the HR and talent communities to you.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat podcast, brought to you by the HR Gazette. I am your host, Bill Banham, and today I am joined by Michael Moon. Michael Moon, PhD, is CEO and Principal Analyst at ExcelHRate Research and Advisory Services and founder and Principal Consultant at MMM and Associates. Michael, welcome to the HR Chat podcast.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And let's jump straight in. Firstly, tell us a bit about yourself, your career history, and how you came to be at your current roles.
Sure. So I have a very non-traditional path. I think that for a lot of HR professionals, that's the case. But I think my story is a little bit different than most. So I actually started my career as a professional actress. So I worked, I've got my bachelor's and master's in musical theater and theater. And I worked as a union actress until I was about 28. So, musical theater, classically trained opera singer, and, just performing was my thing. As an actress, we all know that they have to do other jobs. So I did a lot of, waiting tables because that's obligatory, but also, temping. And one of the first temp jobs that I had was, an HR admin type role. But it took much longer than that for me to realize, I think I want to do something in HR. But I happened, in the early parts of my career, really just that person that everyone turned to because I'm really good with figuring out how things work. So it's very good from a technology standpoint. And then, I'm very logical one might not think that with a theater degree. But I have this strong sense of kind of process and order and how to put things together. And then also, numbers. Numbers have always been a strong strength for me, stemming from my magnet school education in high school. So, it just kind of something that I fell into. But as I progressed through my career, I had to figure out, well, what do I do now? I have this master's in musical theater, but I have this interest in this other area. What do I do? Like, how do I progress? Do I need another degree? Do I need to move? Or, so I had a chance to, get some very good career advice from one of my mentors, John Malinowski, who at the time was the VP of talent for Raytheon. And, he flat out laid it out to me and said, if you really want to, go further at Raytheon, you got two options. You can either move to a satellite location, or you probably should go back and get a business-related degree. So at that time, I made the decision to go back to school and get my master's in HR. And at that doors are started to open for me, interestingly enough. All of a sudden, I was being considered for exempt roles, even though I didn't really have the experience. But it was a good sign for me that I had made the right choice. And then I think, I landed in reporting and analytics for a while there. I spent some time in HRIS and a little bit of time actually for a year working for a vendor doing technology implementation projects, as well as, training and change management around that. And then I went back to work my last practitioner role at Thomson Reuters, and progressed again from reporting and analytics and moved over to the talent development side. And this is about the same time that I had decided to pursue my PhD. I finished the PhD program. I was working on engagement survey analysis, talent review development, and just realize that, my skill set, at least for someone that lives on the East Coast, there weren't a lot of opportunities for me quite yet. And you would think, okay, and someone who has HR analytics experience, be lots of job opportunities. But at least, and it's pretty much true today, and back then too, most of these jobs exist, on the West Coast. There's a couple spattering, in Chicago and in the South. But I knew what I didn't want to do was continue to just be I didn't want to be a generalist. I really wanted to be helping provide strategic guidance to HR around making the right decisions around their people, using research, analytics, data, to make those decisions. And so that's when I made the leap and decided to actually go into doing research, and worked for a company out of Seattle called I4CP for a little while. And then more recently went over to become the research director for Aberdeen Group's human capital management practice. Spent about a year and a half there, and which was great because I got back into the HR tech world. Strong passion for me, an area kind of where my roots were, and then about a year ago, I decided to branch out and start my own firm. Initially it was an HCM consultancy, so that's one of my companies. Really just working directly with HR practitioners on a wide variety of topics, and then the research and advisory services firm, which is an analyst firm, and the customers that I support there are human capital management vendors.
Let's imagine that you're at a networking event, okay? And somebody comes up to you, and they've read your bio, and they see that you've got so many strings to your bow, so to speak, and they say to you, "Why HR? Why analytics? Why a PhD?" What would you say to them?
It really has to do with, I think it starts back with the numbers, just being really good at math as a kid, and loving numbers and there was such satisfaction I got from solving a math problem or using math to solve another problem. I'm a little bit of, no, not a little, I'm a lot of a geek. But I also knew I didn't want to use my superpower to do something boring. I didn't want, and no offense to these professions, but I didn't want to be an accountant. Really no desire to go into financial services or do anything along those lines. But I also had no idea what I could do with it. But I knew that I wanted to use it in some way to actually help people, to impact their lives. So that's kind of that intersection, with HR and analytics. Now, I didn't join HR because I like people. Like I said before, it was a happy accident. But then, as I think because of my, because of my experience as an actress and the degrees that I had in acting, and that it made it really difficult for me to get taken seriously. And even though I had the capabilities and I'd worked on the projects that one would think, oh yeah, she's qualified, I had this stigma that I needed to overcome. That was number one. Number two, I also joke somewhat seriously, but not, that I needed a way to continue to defer my student loans. So it's like, maybe I'll go get another degree. But in reality, it was, I had come up with my own methodologies and approaches and calculations to how I was doing my job in talent analytics. And I felt that, I've always been one of those people that, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. I want to feel like, say I'm an expert in something, or to say that I'm qualified enough just to teach someone else how to do something, I need to really know it well myself. And so, it was Talent Management Magazine, and there was an advertisement for Bellevue University, which is where I ultimately got my PhD. And it was this ad, in the way that they described the program, it was, statistics was required, and it was, thinking about it, people from a strategic approach, and how do you apply, evidence-based management to how you make these decisions. And then learning about what really drives and motivates people in the workplace, and how do you connect the dots between, the investments you make in people, and whether or not, that those investments actually make an impact, not only on the organization, but also on the individual. So I felt the only way for me to really have the type of impact that I wanted was to go through a program like that. And it is the only one of its kind. And it was the first, and it's still the only, and an incredibly unique program that actually combines HR, organizational psychology, finance, and economics.
How do you think your background and training in theatre has impacted the professional that you're on today?
Well, I think that it helps really balance me, because as I said before, strong with numbers, very logical, very analytical sometimes to a T. I always joke when someone makes a comment about, oh, well, based on X, I believe Y. I'm like, well, you know what, we need to get a couple more data points first before we can make that decision. And so my whole family makes fun of me. So, but I think, I have a very strong emotional side as well. So I actually have referred to myself as being ambicerebral. So I'm both equally right and left brained. And I think that, the theater training has actually enabled me to think about the human side of data, to be able to empathize, to put myself in other people's shoes, just try and think about what are all the different points of view that I should be considering in my research. So, I think that's one way. And the other really is this, because I am incredibly creative as well, I'm able to really, communicate the story behind the data in a way that is compelling and sometimes can even emotionally charge people. And I can also display that information in a much more creative way, which sometimes, we need to do to make that dry data, really jump out at people. So I think those are kind of the two ways that it's impacted me as a professional.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of this so far, but here's another scenario for you. You're in an elevator, and you've got your 30 seconds to give your elevator pitch. And somebody says to you, "What does ExcelHRate and MMM and Associates do?" What do you say to them?
So I got my elevator pitch, which is we're an innovative analyst firm that provides strategic and research advisory services to human capital management vendors as well as HR practitioners. And essentially what we do is we look at, I focus primarily on 5 particular topical areas, and there's a reason for that, but they are performance management, employee engagement, social technology, well-being, and analytics. And so, analytics, how that weaves through all of those areas. And so, I do research and create content and provide guidance to vendors and practitioners around those topics.
Awesome. Just in time for me to get off at floor 15. Thank you very much. What does an average work week look like for you, Michael?
Oh, I'm so happy to say I don't have one of those. I think that's also one of those reasons why I think, I left the practitioner world and I work remotely, and I have for a very long time. I'm more productive this way. So there really isn't an average week. And I think, if I ever got to that point where I could tell you the answer to that, it'd be time for me to move on. So, I have 3 or 4 briefings a week on average with vendors, and then I have client calls. One week I might be delivering a webinar. The next I might actually be speaking at a conference, writing white papers, doing a blog, doing podcasts, doing Twitter chats. So it's a little bit of everything, and then obviously, just lots and lots of writing. So.
So as a speaker, as a presenter of webinars and so on, what do you think are the 2 or 3 key components to make a powerful, engaging presentation?
So the way that I'm gonna answer that is also partially what I think is important for me in order to how I differentiate myself from others. So, and this is the one way that I do that. Every webinar that I do, there's research in it. So I like to present, the actual empirical research, what are the experts saying on a topic that is not necessarily the thought leaders, but the academics, the heavy researchers in the space, because what I want to try and do is set that foundation, and have part of what I'm doing be educational. So teaching people something they didn't know before. And then I think the other piece behind it is being able to, share stories of organizations that have, if you talk, especially when you're presenting, research, some of that can be dry. So, taking that and what's the practical application of that if we're an organization, and being able to also share specific organizations that have, taken that approach and, lived it, breathed it, and been through it. And so what does that look like? So I think, it's educating, through research. It is, sharing real world examples. And then it's about also for me creating a dialogue. So I try, especially if I'm doing one with a vendor, I tell them up front, don't wait until the end to throw those questions in, and hey, let's have a dialogue ourselves. So because we're most people are logging into these webinars on their lunch hour, or they're taking an hour off in the afternoon and they're listening in. They're probably multitasking, and if there's just one voice talking for a long period of time, you're not really going to pay attention. So that's the other thing, is I just try to make it light, some informal, dialogue, answer questions as we go.
So talking of light and informal, here's a silly question for you, which you'll appreciate as a bit of a thespian. Who would play you in a movie and why?
Oh my! So who would play me? Well, it would have to be someone that has, a little bit of a multiple personality kind of going for her. Maybe Winona Ryder. Maybe. I don't know. It's got to be someone that has that ability to portray a little bit of wackiness and intelligence at the same time. So.
What advice? Now we're getting serious again. Oh God. What advice would you offer to newbies in HR and maybe students of HR programs who are just beginning their HR analytics journey? Say.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start with the students of HR programs, and I can also start there and also say the path that I took and why I think it was so successful for me. Most HR programs, especially at the undergraduate level, but even at the master's level, which is what I experienced as well, they're very, very topical. So you've got your class on compensation, you've got your class on benefits, you've got your class on employee relations, and many of these HR programs don't reside within a business school. So they're part of like the College of Arts and Sciences or the Humanities, and so for me, I recognized that, that just wasn't going to cut it for the type of work that I was trying to do. So I made the deliberate choice to take all of my electives for my master's program in the business school. So I think, as a student, if you don't feel, obviously if you're just looking for a school and the kind of HR person that you want to be, and you want to be more strategic and you want to be able, to use analytics to help make better people decisions and business decisions, I would seek out programs that actually offer courses in financial acumen, or again have that ability for you to take courses outside of your major, to actually supplement that. And then in terms of people that are just new to HR, just early in their professions, or even those who are early on that, I really want to start getting engaged with analytics. There's no one right path, but I think the most important thing is to take baby steps and recognize that there is no there's no complete formula about where you should start, but it's also leaning on the network and leaning on there's so much amazing content that's being produced in this space. So there's a lot that you can teach yourself. There are courses that you can take, and it's not a scary journey, especially if you do the small steps at a time, and don't get afraid of these crazy terms that are being thrown around like big data. So again, we don't have to go there. HR really doesn't, in my opinion, there really is, the application of big data to HR problems is a little bit of overkill. So if we think about, big data with a little b, and we think about just small little projects, and trying to find ways to educate, ourselves, through conferences or workshops, a little bit at a time. I think that's my advice.
As someone who's so heavily immersed within the HR tech and analytics space, can you do a little shout out to 2 or 3 companies that you love? Maybe companies that you've seen at events like HR Tech. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So I will tell you. Yeah. There's one that I got introduced to HR Tech this year that I'm very excited about. It's just, we think about this revolution, will air quotes, in performance management. And I wrote about this last year, actually on Talent Culture, about the two main trends that I saw driving HR technology, which was also then helping support changes in HR. And one of those was personalization and the ability to manage people at individual levels and not treat them like, well, this is the group of employees, so this is your development here and this is your performance here. But at any rate, to help really facilitate, if we're going to have continuous conversations and provide more frequent feedback, which is what we should have been doing all along. It's not a new. It seems to be new in most people's eyes, but in reality, our need as humans is so that we get feedback, so that we know, should I keep doing something the same way? Should I make adjustments? Should I stop doing it? And that's how we learn. So in order for managers to start to have those conversations more regularly, the technology has to be there to support them. And so the vendor, long introduction, that I really like was High Ground. So they're very innovative. They also got some, I don't want to scare anyone, but some machine learning that is really cool without making you go, oh my gosh, this is a robot or this is artificial intelligence. They also had the best booth if you had a chance to go by. They had the puppies, so that was a no-brainer. But I really like their technology. And then there's an HCM suite that I really like. Called C-Factor. Well, the company C-Factor works, and the product is Vibe HCM. And one of the reasons that I really like them is in my passion and my PhD work was in social technology adoption in the workplace. So for them, it's the way that they've integrated social features into the technology, the way that they've also, not only from social connections with individuals and information, but also creating a knowledge base for HR to post answers to questions that other people. So it's kind of like a light jive, but much more interactive, and it's built in a way that and I'll use the word engage a different way. It engages individuals in the actual application. So it's not like it doesn't feel like you're doing something transactional. And then, oh gosh, there's so many exciting ones. So TrustSphere is another one. They are, one of my specialty areas is social network analysis, and the methodologies that, go behind that, and social capital theory. And this particular vendor actually mines email data, IVR data, chat messages in organizations to help figure out what kinds of networks exist. So who's collaborating with whom, who's communicating with whom, and being able to then identify, where there might be pockets. So organizations can be a lot more proactive about identifying, maybe this is person over here. They're not on our high potential list, and they're an above average performer, but look at them, they're the center of this network, and we should find out what is it about this person, and oh gosh, what happens if we remove that person from the network? So it's some really interesting technology. I think we're a little far away from a full adoption in HR of actually using networks from an analytical perspective and a diagnostic tool perspective. But I believe that 5-7 years from now that we'll see a lot more acceptance of that. So I think TrustSphere is a great one, and then there's another one that's called Polynode. They're much more focused on the HR and organizational effectiveness in looking at networks and how they impact that.
So I'm for sure going to invite you on for another show, and we're for sure going to talk about social tech adoption in the workplace. Because I think that is a very, very interesting topic. But we're coming towards the end of this particular show. Before we wrap up, just a couple of other questions for you.
Sure.
Firstly, can you list 2 or 3 other influencers in the HR tech and analytics space that you follow and you respect?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a HR technology, I follow a lot of Jason Averbook's stuff. Not only the content but that he provides, but also I really love hearing him speak. He's very engaging, very passionate. So it reminds me a little bit of myself. So from an HR technology perspective, and then from an analytics perspective, my analytics hero, and I think I've said this on another recent podcast, is Alec Levinson, and he is a research scientist for the Center for Effective Organizations at USC. And then Evan Sinar, who works for DDI. He's probably the most prolific Twitter person in his profession. He's actually an IO psychologist, a PhD as well. And man, the stuff that he posts, it's some really great stuff around data and visualization. It gets you thinking about what's the future of this field. And so those are the three folks that I follow on a regular basis.
Are there any events that you're going to be attending or speaking at in 2017? If so, which ones?
So I'm going to be, so I'm speaking in April with the Human Resource Executives Health and Benefits Conference, actually speaking on the power, tapping into the power of social connections in the workplace. Really, the topic is around social well-being, but also ways in which technology can facilitate that. So I've done a lot of work around well-being. I have a book that I've been working on for a couple of months now on the topic, workplace well-being and the role that technology plays in that. And then I know I'm speaking somewhere else, and it's just dropping off the tip of my mouth. I can't, and then I also have a couple of webinars. I've got one webinar coming up actually in the 1st of February with a vendor called Reflective, which is also a pretty innovative performance management solution, along the lines of High Ground. Not quite there is same. Okay, here's my analyst hat. Not quite the same in terms of the technology that they have, but definitely forward thinking.
Oh my gosh, you are such a busy lady. Wow. Just finally, Michael, how can our listeners learn more about you?
Well, I'm very active on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So there's lots of information. I post a lot there. I also have two websites. The one is for the analyst firm, which is ExcelHRate.com, which is ExcelHRate. That tells me, that's a little bit more about the company, about how we support vendors. But then in there is also a link to my personal website, which is michaelmoonhcm.com. And that has all kinds of great articles, publications that I've authored, webinars that I've presented, recordings of those, as well as things like, podcasts I participated in, and a little bit about my background and my passions, so you kind of get the human side as well. And then on ExcelHRate.com, there's also a blog, and so I post frequently there. That's where my reviews of vendors go. And then also some of the more, academic-y type things as well, where I try to take an academic article and make it more practical, summarize it in a way that HR practitioners can then take action on that information.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, that takes us to the end of this. That just leaves me to say, Michael M. Moon, PhD, thank you so much for joining us today on the HR Chat podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
And listeners, thank you very much for tuning in. I've been your host, Bill Banham. This has been the HR Chat podcast brought to you by the HR Gazette. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the HR Chat podcast, brought to you by the HR Gazette.